Toss up 1, mathematics. Pencil and paper ready. James needs to find the perimeter of an equilateral triangle whose area is 16 times the square root of 3. He can use Heron's formula, the properties of 30, 60, and 90 triangles, or the formula for the area of an equilateral triangle to find the length of one side, which he then troubles to compute the perimeter. For 10 points, what is the perimeter of an equilateral triangle whose area is 16 root 3? Toss up 2, miscellaneous. One version of this character was resurrected as the Red Hood after being brutally beaten with a crowbar and dying in a Death in the Family arc. The first version of this superhero eventually became Nightwing and had entered this role after his circus performer parents were killed. Jason Todd and Dick Grayson have served in this role. For 10 points, name this boy wonder who serves as sidekick to Batman.
They all better know this one.
Toss up 3, science. Like the kidney, this organ uses glycine acetyltransferase to conjugate glycine to acetyl-CoA. Its sinusoids contain specialized immune cells called Kupffer cells, and it's bisected by the falciform ligament. It contains cytochromes involved in blood detoxification, and its malfunction can result in jaundice. For 10 points, name this organ also responsible for producing bile that it is inflamed in hepatitis. Toss up 4, fine arts. This composer wrote a set of variations on a duet from Don Giovanni that prompted Robert Schumann to declare him a genius. The circle of fifths provides the ordering for his set of 24 preludes. His etudes include the Aeolian harp and one written during the November uprising. One of his waltzes was inspired by a dog chasing its tail. The Revolutionary Etude and Minute Waltz are by, for 10 points, what Polish composer? Toss up 5, mathematics. The absolute value of this kind of expression gives the volume change of a linear transformation. LU decompositions may be used to calculate this value using the fact that for a triangular matrix, it is the product of the elements on the diagonal. Some examples of this value are divided by others in Cramer's rule, and swapping rows changes its sign. For 10 points, give this value that for a 2 by 2 matrix is ADBC. Toss-up 6, literature. While visiting a desolate beach, the protagonist of this novel hears the scream of a creature resembling a huge butterfly. In an epilogue, the narrator of this novel's frame story is comforted by two strange white flowers, given to the protagonist by Weena. The title object of this novel is stolen by Morlocks, who prey upon the Eloi. For 10 points, name this H. G. Wells novel about a man who travels to the future. Toss-up 7, mathematics. Pencil and paper ready. Kathleen needs to find the area of the square whose four vertices are at the point 0, 0, -5, 5, 0, 10, and 5, 5. Kathleen draws the square and realizes that she can find the area by either computing the length of one side or by using an area formula that incorporates the length of the square's diagonals. For 10 points, find the area of the given square. Toss-up 8, literature. One character in this novel is hit in the head with a spittoon, loses his memory, and becomes an expert tracker. A character in this novel is switched at birth with Wee Willie Winkie's son, whose most notable features are his strong knees as compared to the protagonist's telepathic nose. Salem Sanai gains magical powers and is born at the instant of India's independence in, for 10 points, what novel by Salman Rushdie? Toss-up 9, mathematics. This letter names the Laplace operator, the Kronecker function, and a function with a sharp spike of infinite height at 0, the Dirac function. When plus or minus signs are placed beside this letter, it denotes the relative electronegativity of atoms in polar molecules. This letter also represents the discriminant of a polynomial. For 10 points, name this Greek letter that denotes the charge in a quantity. Toss-up 10, social studies. J. L. Mackey's paper on this concept and omnipotence inspired Alvin Plantinga's free will defense. This term is used as an adjective describing a figure who inspires the method of doubt in the Meditations on First Philosophy. That figure is a genius, devised by Rene Descartes. Gottfried Leibniz Thedisy tackled the namesake problem of how an omnipotent, benevolent God could allow for 10 points what Malagian phenomenon. Toss-up 11, Fine Arts. This man painted a glass with red liquid on a table next to the bed of his tubercular sister Sophie. That work, The Sick Child, was included in this artist's The Frieze of Life series. In another of his works, the sky is red because of the eruption of Krakatoa, and a figure on a bridge holds the sides of its face with its mouth agape. For 10 points, name this Norwegian painter of The Scream. Toss-up 12, literature. After relating the tale of this figure, Hesiod comments, thus there is no way to escape the will of Zeus. This figure gave birth to Pyrrha after marrying Epimetheus. This woman served as the god's revenge for Prometheus's theft of fire, and her name meant all gifts. Hope was the only remaining entity after. For 10 points, what first woman in Greek mythology released the world's evils by opening a box? Toss-up 13, Science. A more precise version of this principle in Madelung's rule, which involves comparisons of the quantity n plus L. Exceptions of this rule to arise in atoms with partially filled d orbitals such as chromium and copper. After applying this principle, Hund's rule can be used to place electrons in individual orbitals. For 10 points, name this principle that electrons fill orbitals in order of increasing energy. Toss-up 14, Social Studies. This man beat Republican Hal Suit in a 1970 gubernatorial election, while his primary challengers that year included Ku Klux Klan leader J.B. Stoner. After the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan, this president announced a boycott of the Moscow Olympics. The SALT II Treaty and Camp David Accords were signed during his presidency. For 10 points, name this Georgia politician who in 1980 was defeated by Ronald Reagan.
Toss-up 15, Fine Arts. In this work, one character mourns her husband who was killed in a craps game by singing, "My man's gone now." Sport and Life sings a song dismissing the things that you're liable to read in the Bible called "It Ain't Necessarily So." I Got Plenty o' Nuttin' in Summertime are songs from, for 10 points, what opera named for two African Americans living in Catfish Row by George Gershwin. Toss-up 16, Science. The Carnegie and Galilea were two ships used to survey this entity, which can be studied by examining the remnants in rock samples. According to the geodynamic theory, it is generated by the convection of liquid metal in the outer core. This structure feeds the Van Allen belts by deflecting the charged particles of the solar wind. For 10 points, name this property of Earth that aligns compass needles. Toss-up 17, Social Studies. This country's independence is celebrated on I Will Remain Day, and its first emperor gave the cry of Impurgana. The Golden Law ended slavery in this country, which was part of the Triple Alliance with Argentina and Uruguay. The Estado Novo was established under Getulio Vargas in this country. Pedro Cabral discovered for 10 points what country was led by Pedro I after it split from Portugal. Toss-up 18, Mathematics. Pencil and paper ready. Edgar is a bookmaker who wants to offer fair odds against the event that a card randomly dealt from a standard 52 deck is a face card. He knows that those odds should be expressed in the form of x to y against, where x and y are integers, giving the relationship probabilities of unfavorable and favorable outcomes. For 10 points, what are the odds against a random card being a face card? Toss-up 19, Literature. This novel's narrator describes an excursion into the enchantments of the past in which he learned about Annabel Trace's affair with Cass Mestern. Judge Irwin is investigated by the novel's narrator, who eventually marries Anne Stanton. Jack Burton works for Governor Willie Stark in the novel, which is partially inspired by the Louisiana politician Huey Long. For 10 points, name this novel by Robert Penn Warren. Toss-up 20, science. In the nerve gas sarin, a fluorine atom is bonded to this element. This element is attached to 3 phenyl groups in a ylide used in the Wittig reaction. Its pentachloride breaks the octet rule. Adjacent DNA bases are jointed by diester bonds containing this element, which comes in red and white allotrophs. For 10 points, name this element below nitrogen on the periodic table, whose atomic symbol is P. Toss-up 21, social studies. The Simon Commission studied constitutional reform for this country, where failure to accept the Montague-Chelmsford reforms led to the passage of the harsher Rowlatt Acts. Reginald Dyer perpetrated a massacre in 1919 in this country's Golden Temple in Amritsar, which galvanized support for the man who led the Dandi Salt March and the champion Satyagraha. For 10 points, name this British colony home to Mahatma Gandhi. Toss-up 22, literature. In one novel by this author, the dying John tells his sons Oscar and Lou that they should allow themselves to be guided by their sister Alexandra. This author also wrote a novel whose character kills a rattlesnake while visiting a prairie dog town and grows up near the title member of Bohemian Shermada family. For 10 points, name this author who wrote about the immigrants to Nebraska in O Pioneers in My Antonia. Toss-up 23, social studies. In 2012, this nation passed a law reducing the number of members needed to register a new political party form from 40,000 to 500. That same year, it became a member of the WTO shortly after convicting 3 female musicians of hooliganism for protesting in a church. 1,500 people were injured during a February 2013 meteor strike in, for 10 points, what nation in which a U.S. adoption ban was signed by President Vladimir Putin? Toss-up 24, science. This dimensionless quantity equals the square root of a product of the relative permittivity and permeability. Multiple values for it give rise to bifringence. The arctangent of the ratio of its values for 2 media yields Brewster's angle. It is the ratio of the speeds of light in a vacuum and in a material. For 10 points, name this quantity that multiplies the sine of the angle in indentance in Snell's law.